When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him at once."
Da Judas nun hinausgegangen war, spricht Jesus: Jetzt ist der Menschensohn verherrlicht und Gott ist verherrlicht in ihm. Ist Gott verherrlicht in ihm, so wird Gott ihn auch verherrlichen in sich und wird ihn bald verherrlichen.
Little children, I am with you only a while longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come.
Ihr Kinder, ich bin noch eine kleine Weile bei euch. Ihr werdet mich suchen. Und wie ich zu den Juden sagte, sage ich auch zu euch. Wo ich hingehe, da könnt ihr nicht mit hinkommen.
I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.
Ein neues Gebot gebe ich euch, dass ihr euch untereinander liebt, wie ich euch geliebt habe, damit ihr auch einander lieb habt. Daran wird jedermann erkennen, dass ihr meine Jünger seid, wenn ihr Liebe untereinander habt.
The word of the Lord. So here we are. It is the 5th Sunday, as we said. I've made my excuses for my general appearance. I slept on the floor. I slept only a little bit, but it was worth it. This is our last comfy immersion weekend. I was looking for a lot more disappointment. This was our last comfy immersion weekend. Thank you. Oh, I'm glad the sounds came from back there. It came from the people driving you, not those committing their lives to this. It has been incredible. We have had some phenomenal conversations, and then today we have this gospel with some very incredible lines in it. Let's be honest, that first part, when he had gone out, Jesus said, now the Son of Man has been glorified and glorified. It's a little clunky. It's a little challenging in terms of the wording, but then it gets quite rich. I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, I'll say now to you where I'm going, you cannot come. It's a beautiful thing. It's a gospel I would gladly love to gush over, and one that I do struggle reading with that clunky part. But before I dive right into that, as I mentioned, it is that last immersion weekend, so I want us to have a little bit of a focus on that. And I apologize, it'll be a focus on you. No, I have not warned them. Yes, this will be embarrassing, and I think that all of your families are just fine with that. It looks like that's a yes. The last time that we get to stand here and have these conversations, the last time I can really get away with dragging in outrageous props. And Alex, I'm sure you appreciate this more than anybody. This will be, well, I'm not going to make a promise, possibly one of the last times. We have had some great conversations, and those great conversations, in many ways, I think, are summed up in this gospel. Do not get anxious. But this gospel and what it says and asks us to do is essentially a confirmation exam. Terrible word. Nobody starts sweating. It's going to be all right, I promise. Now, are you wishing that you'd listen to the gospel more clearly? Yes, don't worry. I always like to repeat things. The dreaded exam, for those of you that can remember your confirmation time, I've heard great stories of the council sitting here and you standing in front and being grilled. Memorize this, tell us that. I'm getting a lot of heads nodding. Yes. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound like a firing squad? Yes, absolutely terrifying. And I'm sorry that you went through that. And as the family members and loving community of these individuals, I'm sure that you wouldn't want us to put them through that. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that you wouldn't want us to put them through that. But don't worry, we're not going to let them get off too easy. We've asked some very big and some very challenging questions along the way, and I always like to, you've maybe noticed, do things in threes. So we ask it kind of three different ways because we all learn and experience information and questions differently. So that we all can have some equal access to this great conversation, we try to ask it in many different ways. With your confirmation exam, perhaps there were 3 to 4 to 5 to 12 things that you had to have memorized, 10 of those being commandments. You likely had to have some recitations of a passage that you had chosen. All of those beautiful things. And I saw Dan the man slide in somewhere in the back. For those of you that remember our conversation about mint, we learned about mint together. Okay, we learned about mint, but then together we experienced mint. We went from knowing a lot about mint to knowing mint. For those of you that weren't here, it was a real conversation. I'm actually talking about mint. Our goal the whole time was to start that conversation and set it up that way so that I never had to stand here in front of them and say, what do you know about God? What have you memorized? Allow me, as a tall person, to teach you, as now very tall people as well, about God. We did want to say all of the things that you know about God. That's great and that's interesting, and everybody wants to hear that. Going forward in your life, my hope, and I believe the hope of everybody else, is that they each know God. We got to discuss images of God this week, not those great debates of, is this an icon? Is this an idol? Am I praying to this, through this, with this? None of that. But images of God. It's a tough question. And don't worry, I'm going to ask the question of you as well. There's nothing comfortable or easy about this, and I won't even pretend to apologize. Close your eyes and picture God. With your eyes still closed, picture an event or a moment or an experience in which you knew God was there. Open your eyes. Try to feel less uncomfortable about that whole experience. I thank you all for it. Nothing easy about that, is there? We have asked them to articulate their image of God. Those were those beautiful stained glass windows you saw walking in. We asked them to articulate their image of God and find it and place it in our story as splayed out across these beautiful windows. We asked them to find a piece of scripture that spoke to what they know about God in that image. And they did all of those things. And there was nothing easy about it. And it was incredible. They are your children. I've just borrowed them often. So if I said to your child, explain to me God, your image of God, I don't know if you can imagine what the answer to that would be. Do I have hysterical stories to share with you that were answers to that question? Absolutely, and we'll all do that later. But the profound answers that were shared, they back my whole belief in the importance of children's, youth, and family ministry as the ministry of the church. Because these individuals participated in revelation. They were forms and sources and sponsors of revelation. They are not empty vessels that we are to fill with this knowledge. They came with profound knowledge. We asked them to look at these images. I know they're quite far and you won't be able to see them, and that is all right. But they are here, and they are of, some of them, the mundane. Some of them are images of the guy in the clouds with the long beard as drawn by a child. Some are of question marks. Some were blank. Some are of beautiful moments of a group of children speaking. Some of them are these great stacked hands. Some are of the Eucharist itself. And we asked them, in this image, do you see God? Does this image speak to your image and understanding of God? I asked you guys the same. This is not an easy question. The answers were incredible. Without citing or quoting anybody, there was, I always refer to the Schleife moment, the ribbon, the thread throughout. We see it through all of our windows. The thread throughout that pulled them all together was an understanding that God is in the togetherness. God is the reason and the urge and the hope and the desire to gather. God loved us first, therefore showing us love. And because of that love, we can and will demonstrate it to others. These were the moments throughout. A bunch of stacked hands, people clearly ready to go and storm the football pitch. But in that was gathering. And God's desire for us to gather to one another, that message of reconciliation, the mission of God. Christ as the light in the darkness. And then one of the most important in my mind and heart, for my hope for them at least, there's this image. Alex, I promise I won't run up and down the aisles this time. It's not Easter. There's this image. It looks like a marshmallow and a peanut to me. That's about what I was able to see. But numerous of us were able to see and articulate a very interesting moment in this image. Some said, I see God with Jesus. That's that window right there. God as the shepherd. And others were able to say, yes, I definitely see God with Jesus, but I see God with me. I see me with others. To be able to see God and others and ourselves in our story. Oh, I'm not going to lie, that was the goal. I promised them they wouldn't have to memorize and regurgitate. But if they are able to have a moment where they can see themselves in our story, well, to me, that's some pretty good news. I did say I was going to gush about you, but I also did use the dreaded exam word. Yes. What does our gospel call out? What does it ask of us? Well, it says we're going to look for God. We will look for God, it says. When we set these images in front of them, it was a moment of looking and many moments of finding and then beautiful moments of sharing. The gospel says we will look. As Christians, our heart will yearn, we will look. They looked and they found, and you did it immediately. It was going to be pick up one card and tell us. I think we went through 3 or 4 rounds. It is easy for each and every one of you to see, find, experience, and know God, even in the mundane of a brick wall. That is important. That's what the gospel asks us to do. What else does it ask us to do? It says, it's this new commandment, the most updated version of, love one another as I have loved you. This is how people will know you. So how will people identify you as a Christian? Is it because you have a cross around your neck or a cross hanging from your car? Or is it because you say offensive things to people seeking medical treatment? How will people know? No, people will know by the way that you love. There are love languages. I know this was a big conversation once upon a time for a while, but if we think about those love languages, we woke up this morning, for those of us that slept, I was not one of them. However, I found my way downstairs into a big plume of smoke because they had made French toast for us. This afternoon, we will have our AGM. After this, the place will air out for 20 minutes. We'll all come back into the building. We will have our AGM, a very important moment. And for that one, we have volunteers who are going to make waffles for everybody so that we have that sustenance for the journey. We have some who have read in multiple languages, but without too much prompting or pushing, each of them has found a way in which they would like to serve their church today. That's one of the most loving things that we can do, to wake somebody up, the gentleman at least, with fresh waffles, the smell of that in the air. That type of service is a beautiful demonstration of grace. And then for them to be able to articulate the why. Why is it that you are able to do these things? It came out of one of our passages, our confirmation motto. Well, we love because we were loved and God showed us love first. First was God's love. To be able to articulate a why, that is impressive. And then they lived it. By serving out of that love, not a demand or a command or a push, maybe a gentle hint of guilt, but I mean, that's what I'm here for. I'm a motivator, but they served out of that love. They lived the gospel. They found ways to bring their voices, their gifts, their skills, their charisms, all of these things to their church that they hope to be confirmed into. When is confirmation? June 5th. Why is it June 5th? Because it's Pentecost. Yes, thank you. We worked on that one real hard. They can tell me about the resurrection. They can tell me about who loved first. Nailing down June 5th was tough, but we've got it. This church has raised up a group of individuals, a generation of people who now feel called, skilled, gifted, and equipped to love and to serve. That's a beautiful thing. To me, they have made it through every inch of the commands and demands of the gospel, and they are now ready to be called disciples. That is an incredible thing. Whether you did it intentionally or otherwise, you may now be called disciples. To me, that's good news. Now, for the rest of you, you are the community in which they will be confirmed into. Do you think that these disciples are ready? Gisela says yes, nobody else is sure. John, the commandment of love, they lived it through service. Do you think they are ready? Yeah. That's how you are the good news that we can use today. And that's why you are part of the great news. And to me, that's exciting.
In the grave they laid him, loved by hatred slain, thinking that he would never wake again, laid in the earth like rain that sleeps unseen. Love is come again like wheat arising green. Der